Are we ready, Mr. Batchelder?
Just about. So for all the folks that are joining us now, we have a few technical.
Thank you.
So we're just about ready. So bear with us. Penny, are you ready?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. So I think we're ready to start. Mr. Project.
Are we on the air, Mr. Batchelder?
Yes, we are.
Okay, welcome everybody to this August 4, 2020 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals for zoning. This meeting is being held on Zoom after some short technical difficulties. Present at the meeting are Ms. Grass, Mr. Judon, Mr. Morrison, Ms. Richards, and Mr. Robinson, and Mr. Krawcheck. From the city staff, Mr. Batchelder and Ms. Ashby. This board does three basic things. We have appeals from the decisions of the zoning administrator. We have requests for special exceptions to the zoning ordinance. Mostly the board acts as a fact-finding group in that capacity. And lastly, we hear requests for zoning variances. Zoning variance test is a hardship test. And in order for the board to grant a zoning variance, it has to find that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property, that these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity, that because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And lastly, we have to find that the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Ms. Ashby, are there any deferrals or withdrawals?
Yes, Mr. Krawcheck. New applications number 610 Nashmore Road has been deferred from the meeting, and application B8 431 Meeting Street has also been deferred.
So those two applications will not be heard at this meeting. The first item on the agenda is item B1, 2628 Cumberland Street. It's for a request, the third one-year extension of a vested right that expires on December 31, 2020. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted on February 2, 2016 under section 54-220 with conditions for a 50-unit accommodations use in a GBA zone district. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a project that was approved several years ago, and under the vested rights ordinance, they are entitled to request another one-year extension. They're on their third one-year extension. They get 5 under the law, and so we're recommending approval of this extension. There's nothing changed that would cause this to not be able or entitled to the extension that they're allowed under the law. And I think the applicant is present. Let's see here, in case they have anything they want to add. I am on mute, or rather allow Mr. Wilson to speak, but our recommendation is that you approve this extension.
City's recommendation is for approval. Ms. Ashby, do you know of any objections to this application?
No, Mr. Krawcheck, there are not any objections.
Okay. Do I hear a motion for approval of the application?
Move approval.
Mr. Judon moves approval, seconded by Mr. Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion for approval, please say aye. And we'll do this individually. Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson?
Aye.
And Mr. Krawcheck votes aye. The motion is unanimously carried and the application is approved. Item number 2 on the agenda is 39 Charleston Place for variance to allow HVAC platform with a 0.8 foot south side setback, 9 feet required, DR1 zoned. Mr. Batchelder.
This concerns a residential property in the Charleston Place development in Charleston Village. And it really is a pretty minor request. It all involves the relocation of a platform that the HVAC unit is placed on. And I'll just go through the slides here. So the platform is over, it's on the front of the unit and it's not placed very well. So the owners would like to relocate that to the side. And the property line is right here. Let's see, I need to turn this on. Here's the property line. And it will not meet the setback requirement of 9 feet. So that's the request, is to allow this platform to be constructed just about a foot away from the property line. It's shown here as being a utility easement. They've contacted all of the service providers and none of them use this easement. So they don't object to allowing the platform in. And our recommendation is for approval. It's my understanding that the applicant has secured the approval of the HOA for this residential development. And so our recommendation is for approval, and we don't know of any objections to this.
Ms. Ashby, do you have any objections to this application?
No, Mr. Krawcheck, there are no objections.
Okay. I hear Mr. Morrison moving for approval, and I've heard a second by Mr. Judon. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And is there any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed, nay. Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson?
Aye.
And Mr. Krawcheck votes aye. The motion is unanimously carried, and the application for the special exception is approved. Item number 3 is 30 Southall Avenue burns down. Special exception to allow vertical extension of second story master bedroom closet to a non-conforming building footprint having a 5-foot east side setback, 9 feet required in zone SR2, Mr. Batchel.
This is a residential property, one floor house. And the homeowners would like to expand the living space in the house by adding a second floor addition to the back portion of the main house. So this site plan shows the area where the second floor addition will be right here. And if I move forward, you can see that the existing house only has a 5-foot 2-inch side setback when 9 feet is required. So building footprint is non-conforming, and in addition, vertical addition to that building footprint requires your approval for a zoning special exception. I'm going to skip ahead. So this is the second floor plan. They'll add a master bedroom, bathroom, closet space. And here are elevations. So you see the existing 1-story house. To maintain that character, they're adding this addition in a way that will not impact the front elevation, as you can see from this drawing right here. And so very sensitive way of doing an addition to maintain the character and integrity of the house. And we're not aware of any objections or concerns. I see that the owner of the property is on, and I will promote him to a panelist, and I see the builder also in attendance, so I'm going to promote him as well. And in the event that they do need to speak, but our recommendation is for approval. And like I said, I'm not aware of any objections to this request.
City recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, do you know of any objections to this recommendation?
No, Mr. Krawcheck, no objections, but the owner has submitted a petition from his adjacent property owners in support of this application, Mr. Robinson at 11 Southfield Avenue and Ms. Marsloff at 15 Southfield Avenue.
And no objections, Ms. Ashby.
No, sir. No objection.
Do I hear a motion for approval?
I'll move for approval.
I'll
Ms.
second.
Bradshaw, approval. Second.
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Richards seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Ms. Grass.
Aye.
Mr. Judon.
Aye.
Mr. Morrison.
Aye.
Ms. Richards.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
And Mr. Krawcheck votes aye. The motion is unanimously carried and the application is approved. The next item on the agenda is item number 4, 9 Lumhouse Street, for a special exception to allow a vertical extension, second-story master bathroom closet to a non-conforming building footprint having a 1.5-foot north side setback, 3 feet required for zone DR1 distribution.
Nine Limehouse is a residential property, very large lot on Limehouse Street. Here's a view of the house from Limehouse Street looking above. This is the brick house, large brick house that you see in this image.
Last year.
A view looking from the south. So here is the house in question. And the addition that they're proposing that requires your approval is located back here. You can't really see the area because of the large tree right here. This is another view from the north. And this is 9 Longham Street. And the addition is proposed to be located right here. Zoning map showing the zoning of the property is DR1. Here's a survey of the property. The house sits approximately 1.5 feet from the north side property line. And the setback requirement on that north side zoning district is 3 feet. So the building footprint is non-conforming by virtue of the 1.5 foot setback on that north side. Here's a site plan of the existing property. This is a site plan showing the proposed changes. The new building over here to the south of the main house where the garage will be, that meets the setback requirements, does not need your approval. So here's an existing floor plan, first floor, second floor. So you see that the second floor ends right here, and then you have the roof over the first floor rear dependency. Elevations, these are existing from the south, from the north. Again, here's the 1-story section today. And from the rear, these are the proposed floor plans, first floor and second floor, which shows the changes that require your approval. So the area shaded right here, this area right here, is a second floor addition over that 1-story section of the house. And it extends vertically that non-conforming north side setback of 1.5 feet. And the length of that addition, I believe, is about 20 feet long. These are the proposed elevations from the south. This is what the addition will look like. So here's the main section of the addition, and then the smaller version section, which is set back from the south wall of the larger portion of the addition. And from the north, so this height right here, I believe, if I was able to measure this correctly on the applicant's plans, is about a little over 9 feet tall over the existing first floor. And this steps down a little bit back here, and the length of this addition, I believe, is 20 feet or approximately 20 feet long. This is a proposed site plan with new landscaping improvements showing the new building over here. One of the concerns has to do with the impact of this addition on, I believe, this tree right here, which is an existing tree, large tree. I'm not sure exactly what kind of tree. It looks like a live oak. I'm going to promote the applicants here shortly, and they can correct me if I'm wrong. But it's not, I don't see it noted on this landscape plan, so I'm presuming that it's a live oak. These are views that were submitted by the applicant showing that proposed addition back here. And then we have the rear view of that addition, which doesn't really show a whole lot. I mean, I guess I should point out this shaded area represents the addition, proposed addition to the existing one-story section of the dependency back here. And with that, I will end my presentation. So the applicant is represented by the architect. The owner of the property, rather, is represented by the architect, Mr. Keys, and Trenham Walker, and then the owner of the property to the north at 7 Limehouse Street is represented by Mr. Quayle, and they are objecting to this request for the special exception based on impacts for light and air, impacts to their property at 7 Limehouse Street, and impacts on the aesthetic character of the environs, which are two factors that the board is to consider when evaluating these requests, these special exception requests. The others have to do with parking and traffic impacts and that sort of thing. Well, I don't think those are applicable, but certainly consideration for light and air impacts and the impact on the aesthetic character of the environs are to be considered. So in light of those concerns from the neighboring property owner, I'm not going to support this. I think that there are oftentimes legitimate concerns with these kinds of additions and how they impact the neighbors to the north. It does begin to limit their access to light and air if you build an existing building and make it taller in that close proximity to the property line. So because of that, I am not supporting the request. At this point, I'm going to promote the applicant and all the folks representing the owner of the property to panelists. And that will conclude my presentation. And so I promoted Mr. Walker and Mr. Keys.
Mr. Walker and Mr. Keys, do you both solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
You'll have to unmute yourselves.
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Keys, are you there? Mr. Batchelder, why are we getting this delay?
Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you fine, yes.
And Mr. Walker responded, Mr. Keys is, I guess, having some trouble.
Okay, well, let's go ahead in the interest of time and hear from Mr. Walker, and Mr. Keys can join us when he joins us. Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trenton Walker on behalf of the applicant. As you heard, Glenn Keys has been the architect of record who has worked with Paul Osley, the owner of 9 Limehouse Street, on the renovations that have been proposed. Before you this evening is the question of the encroachment of the second story extension into the 3-foot setback. As Mr. Batchelder said, this house was constructed 18 inches from the north property line. It was not non-conforming at the time it was constructed. The city passed a setback ordinance that made the north wall non-conforming. The extension is consistent with the existing property line and does not intrude any more than the existing wall. In looking at the square footage of the existing north facade in comparison to this second floor extension, because the first floor that you see is already in existence, it's probably about 6% of the existing north wall facade. The test is whether or not the proposed extension of this building, and again, it's just 18 inches into the setback, is first limited to extending the non-conforming use then in existence, and we qualify under that. The only use is residential. This really isn't an existent, a question of an extension of a non-conforming use, it's more a non-conforming structure. But in any event, the second criterion, which is the one that this application focuses on, is that the extension would not result in an unreasonable intensification of the non-conforming use. And considering the reasonableness of the intensification of the extension, the board shall consider the effect of the extension on properties in the vicinity to include traffic impacts, vehicular and pedestrian safety, parking impacts, potential impacts of noise, lighting, fumes, or obstruction of airflow or light on adjoining property, impacts on the aesthetic character of the environs to include the possible need for screening. Well, the current, as the aerials show, the current space that this second floor extension would occupy now has an oak limb that is largely going to be preserved. If Glenn were here and he can speak more to design, he can come back after I speak. He can tell you that the design is sensitively done to preserve most of that oak limb. The design also, we would submit, does not unreasonably cause an absence of light or create any other impairment of the adjoining property. In fact, as you can see from this aerial that's now on the screen, the location of this proposed second floor extension is in the rear, which is opposite the yard of 7 Limehouse Street, the most open part of the property. So for these reasons, we submit that it's a minimal extension. It's only 18 inches into the setback. It's an extension of the existing wall. It's the best design solution by following the historic north wall, and we would ask for the board's approval because it doesn't unreasonably intensify the non-conforming use. Obviously, the way the wording of the ordinance or the way the ordinance is worded, there can be some intensification. It just can't be unreasonable. Thank you, and I hope Glenn can now speak. Glenn, are you now enabled?
I am enabled, thank you. the design of the rooftop addition was done specifically to protect the tree. The reason you see it stepping down and not extending all the way to the west wall is because of a very large oak limb. We're going to prune one smaller limb, and we put an arborist there to verify that that could be done without damaging the tree. But that's why the stair step is there, is to protect that really incredible live oak. We think this is a minimal addition. It's only 344 square feet. It is a very large house, but it's a house full of very large rooms. So there's not places that are really suitable in the house without impacting some of the grand rooms to what we would all consider a reasonable master bath and dressing room. So we think this is a reasonable request. We've been working with the Historic Charleston Foundation. They do hold an exterior easement on the property, and they have approved this. And I think Ms. Wood will be in to support us as well. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Keys from the members? Thank you, Mr. Keys.
And I see, if I could just interject, I see a Miss Williams, Emily Williams, as an attendee. Is that the owner, and would you like them to be able to speak? If I could ask that to Trenum or Glenn.
Lee, the owner is Paul Alsley, so that would not be the owner. I don't know if that is a representative of the foundation substituting for April Wood.
Okay. Thank you.
Or someone else.
So with that, maybe Penny, I think, do we have other people that do want to speak in favor?
Ms. Ashby, anyone else in favor would like to be heard?
You'll need to unmute yourself, Penny.
I do apologize. Who has Ms. Drolet, Cashion Drolet with Historic Charleston Foundation has signed up to speak in support of the application for 9 Limehouse. Thank you.
Is she present?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Ms. Drolet, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, Cashin Drolet with Historic Charleston Foundation. As was referenced previously, the foundation holds an easement on this property. We have carefully reviewed the application for the special exception, and we have carefully reviewed the proposed alterations to this important historic property. The alterations meet the requirements of our easement and result in additional preservation measures to protect the historically intact interior. The applicant is undertaking an extensive and much needed rehabilitation of 9 Limehouse, and we are fully in support of this request.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ashby, anyone else who wishes to be heard in favor?
No, Mr. Project, that is the only person that I have that is signed up to speak in support.
Okay, and then we'll hear from anyone in opposition. And I understand Mr. Quayle represents the opponent, the neighbor.
And let's see. sorry, I'm not seeing Mr. Quayle listed. I'm wondering if one of these phone numbers that's on the, as an attendee is Mr. Quayle. So I'm going to let's see. So I see the owner next door. I'm gonna unmute the owner.
Can you hear us now?
And is the phone number 843-218, that number, is that Mr. Quayle?
Can you hear us, Lee?
Oh, yeah.
You
Yes,
can hear us.
yes.
All right. So are we good?
Yeah, is that Mr. Quayle?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Quayle, you may proceed, but you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. And Mr. Calhoun is also going to be testifying if you want to have him do the same oath.
Yeah, Mr. Calhoun, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Quayle, proceed. Thank you.
Sir, Mr. Chairman and members, let me first, as a matter of which was the last thing which was just brought up, was historic Charleston. Well, with all due respect to historic Charleston, they're not an impacted party. They're an interested party because of their interior easement. So take that into consideration. I represent Mark Calhoun and his family, owners of 7 Limehouse Street. I sent a rather voluminous submittal yesterday, which really was focused on a variance. I then adjusted it towards 54-110 today, and y'all should have that letter, which essentially deals with all the criteria which are necessary for this to be considered and passed. Our submittal yesterday and today was in opposition. This matter is very personal to the Calhouns and his family. They're very passionate about it, as they should be. I grew up downtown on Broad Street. I know the value of air, breezes, light, sun, stars, as do many of you on the board. The Calhouns are going to be negatively impacted by this. This is not a reasonable exception. They're going to be negatively impacted. The proposed addition is a looming large wall, which we have some photos here. If you can see, that's the way it is now. And Lee, if you could switch over one maybe. And then this is a superimposed photo of what the addition is going to look like. So you take out, a whole bunch of square footage of view of the tree, of the air, of the light. It just closes you in on your backyard, which is inappropriate. They aren't going to be the only folks negatively impacted, because the entire neighborhood and the environs. This addition is going to be able to be seen from Limehouse Street, but also from Council Street, and it's also going to have impact on the flow through from Limehouse to Council Street, and it's inappropriate. Keeping in mind as well, this is a house that's over 6,000 square feet. There certainly is space on the interior to carve out a new bathroom or whatever they want. They're trying to gain more living space at the expense of the aesthetics and the comfort of their neighbors, which we believe, again, is unreasonable and inappropriate. Mr. Calhoun wants to say a few words. We appreciate your time and your consideration. Thank you, sir. Thank you, members.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mark Calhoun. The points I want to make are first of all, you will be able to see this extension from Limehouse Street and also Council Street, which sits on the western side of Limehouse Street. So this extension will be viewable from two street levels, Limehouse and Council. The blocked out section of the view that we'll be losing is approximately 230 square feet. 230 square feet of a view of a beautiful live oak and of the sky and the moon and the stars and the light we're going to lose if this extension is granted. The aerial view that they showed you is very misleading. You can't even come close to appreciating the loss of view we're going to have from a drone taken from the sky. I welcome any of you to come to my property and walk in my garden, the gate's unlocked, and take a look at this section, and you'll appreciate the beauty and the wildlife that we're no longer going to be able to see. Another issue is that the construction of this 230 square feet of wall is going to take place in our beautiful Latrell Briggs garden that we take a lot of care of and we're very proud of. And it's going to necessarily, at a minimum, damage and a maximum destroy that Latrell Briggs garden. It's also simply going to be ugly to look at, not just from our home, but at least 3 or 4 properties that sit adjacent to it on Council Street. That live oak that they're discussing, or they want to cut a large section of trunk down in order to build this section. It's actually going to be a master bathroom extension and walk-in closets off the master bedroom. So it's not a small limb on a big live oak tree. It's a large trunk section of a live oak that is so big that you can see from these photographs that I submitted, it spans over that carriage house and into our garden, and we enjoy looking at it. We enjoy the shade as well. It's not a small limb. And the final thing I would like to say is I've lived in my home at Limehouse Street for 13 years, and I hope to be there another 30 years. I'm raising my 4- and 7-year-old children there, and we spend a lot of time in our garden. It's one of the reasons we take such good care of it. And we enjoy looking at the sky and the stars and seeing the squirrels and the birds land in the trees. And I just feel that it's unreasonable to take a house that's 6,000 square feet on a lot that's a quadruple sized lot and add square footage on it to modernize a bathroom where there's other room in the house that the extension could be had. In fact, the historic, I know this is been told to me by April Wood at the Historic Charleston Foundation. Another change that they want to make to the exterior of 9 Limehouse is removing an enclosed second floor piazza. So they're taking off that square footage and they want to replace it by adding this extension to the back of the house. So the Historic Charleston Foundation leveraged that square footage. They said, okay, we'll let you make these changes if you give us an interior easement in the 9 Limehouse Street, because none existed. Which sounds nice, but unfortunately nobody that works for the Historic Charleston Foundation lives next door to this house, and they were going to have to stare at it for the next 30 years. And I just feel that that's unreasonable, and so does my wife and children, and that's why we feel so strongly about this. Thank you.
Any of the members have any questions for Mr. Calhoun or for Mr. Quayle? Well, thank you very much. Ms. Ashby, anyone else want to be heard in opposition?
I'm not aware of anyone else, Mr. Krawcheck.
Okay. Mr. Walker, in rebuttal.
Thank you. And Glenn, if you're on, I'd like you to respond to the assertions about the work and the destruction of Luttrell Briggs Garden, which we think are entirely unfounded and meant to sway the board without focusing on the question before you. We recognize that this will intrude 18 inches into the setback, but the question is not whether this entire second floor can be constructed, it's whether it can be constructed so that it protrudes 18 inches into the setback. If the owner were to redesign it to pull it back 18 inches, we would still have the same effects. I would suggest to you that that's not the best aesthetically, and that it doesn't do anything to advance the interests that Mr. Quayle and Mr. Calhoun have spoken to. We come back to the question of whether it's an unreasonable intensification by going 18 inches into this setback. This is an historic house. What we're looking at on the photo before you now is just a fraction of the facade. If you will recall the earlier aerials we saw, you will see that already there is a significant structure there. And what we are proposing here is simply to bring that wall along for approximately 20 feet. And as Glenn said, it's stepped down. When we talk about a light, we are not talking about some sort of unreasonable blocking of light. There'll still be considerable sunshine here, nor are we talking about any considerable obstruction of airflow we would submit. So we believe that we have met the requirements of demonstrating that there's not an unreasonable intensification of the various considerations in the ordinance. And Glenn, if you're on, would you speak to the other critiques?
Yes. I have been practicing in Charleston for 34 years, and the lion's share of my work is on the peninsula. So I'm very aware of working in other people's yards. We have in downtown Charleston, you almost always have to get into a neighbor's yard to maintain your house and to do anything on your house. So we know how to do that and protect the yard. We're obviously not going to damage a Luttrell Briggs garden. We work with those all the time, and they are priceless to have, and they can certainly be protected. One thing that we do have is 18 inches of land, which is belongs to 9 Limehouse. That becomes a perfect place where we could put some legs for scaffolding and bridge over and not even impact the yard at all. There are some very creative ways to scaffold today, and we're doing it similarly over on 22 Legree Street right now. So I am confident we will not damage the garden. And we have to maintain the rest of the house as well. So we will have to access that side at some point. And, but we do have that 18 inches of land that provides us some access for some scaffolding that can be used to maintain and to construct the new addition. So we think this is a good solution. It's a great house, and Mr. Ausley is doing an incredible amount of restoration work to the house on the inside and outside. It's going to be quite a landmark property as it is now. It just it's sleepy and needs a lot of rehabilitation and restoration, and it will be a place everyone can be proud of. So I would ask that you grant this exception. As Mr. Walker indicated, if as an option, we would have to set it back to the setback line. We will have to do that. We'd rather not do that. It doesn't architecturally look as appropriate as it would had this been a 2-story building to begin with. But that's something we would have to address if needed.
Thank you, Mr. Keys. Mr. Batchelder, would you read the operative part of the ordinance for the board members?
Yes. Let me do that. The non-conforming use of a building or structure cannot be physically extended to provide more area for the non-conforming use. And I'm only reading the applicable parts of subsection F. Unless the Board of Zoning Appeals zoning, after a duly advertised public hearing, finds that the extension or increase of the non-conforming use is, one, limited to extending or increasing the non-conforming use then in existence, and two, would not result in an unreasonable intensification of the non-conforming use. In considering the reasonableness of the intensification of the extension or increase, the board shall consider the effect of the extension or increase on properties in the vicinity to include traffic impact, vehicular and pedestrian safety, parking impact, potential impacts of noise, lighting, fumes, or obstruction of airflow or light on adjoining property, impacts on the aesthetic character of the environs to include the possible need for screening. If an extension or increase is permitted, the board may impose reasonable and appropriate conditions and safeguards for the protection of the public interest in the neighboring properties, including but not limited to limitation on days and hours, et cetera, et cetera. So those are, that is the test.
Batchelder, you did not recommend approval. You recommended disapproval of this application. It appears from your reading of the ordinance that the issue boils down, at least to me, to the obstruction of airflow and light. Did you consider those factors in making your recommendation?
Yes, when the neighbor raised those objections, I believe that I don't have the expertise of living next door and understanding exactly what the impact of this will be. So I put great weight in neighbors' opinions in that regard, and in light of that, I've recommended against this request.
This structure could be built if it were moved out of the building setback. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
And it would not require the approval of the Board of Zoning Appeals to do so.
Correct.
Okay. And the setback is it 18 inches?
Yes, existing, the building footprint sits about an 8.5 foot off of the north side property line. So that is.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Batchelder. Any discussion, any comments from the members?
I'm not quite sure I've heard from the applicant any contrary information about it impacting light and air. I haven't really heard them discuss that since this is the main issue.
Any
So
further?
I would like to hear from the applicant in regards to the neighbors' concerns about light and air, please.
Mr. Walker, are you there?
I am, and thank you very much. Lee, if you would go back to the aerial that we provided that showed the entire backyard, please. There we go. Our view, and we submit the reasonable view, is when you take into account the entire backyard and the entire structure of 9 Limehouse Street and what is already there, that what is being proposed on the second floor is modest in comparison. We did the calculations. It would extend the existing facade 6%. That is all. And if you look at where it is in relation to the question of airflow, it is in the most open part of the yard. And other than people speculating that airflow might be limited, there isn't any reason to believe that it is going to coop up the yard or stop airflow. If you look at this aerial, you can see just how open that area is. We also believe, given the other part of the wording of the ordinance, that is considering a restrictive airflow. This is, if there's any obstruction, it's very modest. As far as light, same thing. The sky is going to be high. I mean, excuse me, the sky is very high, but the sun is going to be very high in the south. It's still going to provide significant sunlight most of the year, and to the extent that it blocks it a little more at certain times of the year. When you look at the full north facade going over all the way to Limehouse Street, you will see that it is not much more. It's already blocked, and this is not going to block a lot more light. We would say that's speculative, and there will not be a significant impairment of light or airflow, and that for that reason, it's not an unreasonable intensification. There may be some speculative, modest, minimal effect on light and on airflow, but it's not consequential. Thank you.
Ms. Grass, do you have any questions for Mr. Walker?
Not really a question. I guess I just have a comment maybe we could discuss further if any of the board members care to. It's a little hard to judge what the impact's going to be. Many times when this is an issue, we have studies on light that we can base our opinions on, or our judgments on. So I guess with the lack of that kind of information, it's hard to hear one side say it would impact and the other say it wouldn't impact. It seems like, to me, it would impact. It would have some impact. But again, without that, a study that we're usually presented with, it's difficult to say that there would not be an impact.
Can I also,
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, this is Joe Quayle. May I be heard, please?
No, Mr. Quayle, unless one of the board members has a question for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's fine.
Thank you.
I have a question for
Ms.
Mr.
Richards.
Walker. For Mr. Walker. So, or Mr. Keys maybe. So is it my understanding that without this variance, you potentially would build the same structure just 18 inches further in and not in line with the current north facade wall?
That is correct.
So in approving this variance, basically all you're going to be doing is being able to architecturally make that wall read a little better, and without this variance, potentially it will just be jogged back 18 inches. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Well, I think I was the adjacent property owner. I'd be concerned about this particular issue. And we've dealt with these many, many times over the years, sometimes more dramatic than this, sometimes less. And I think there are issues of concern that we as a board have, that adjoining properties are not encroached on indirectly or directly by activity on neighboring properties. I think, usually when we look at these cases, when they come before us, the word unreasonable intensification is the turn phrase. You look at that, and I think that's what we've got to look at, regardless of how we feel about it as individuals or how we would feel about it as an adjoining property owner. And I think that's what the ordinance is calling us to. Is this an unreasonable intensification? Of course, the other thing is, as Ms. Richards just brought out, if they move it in 18 inches, then it becomes architecturally unsightly to an adjoining property, I think. So I think that, in my opinion, that's where we are.
Anyone further? I think this is a very close question. From my view, I think the burden is on the applicant to prove their case. It's a question of light and air. It's not going to help the light and air situation for the neighbor. I think that because the burden is on the applicant, I just can't, I feel like Mr. Batcher, I can't support the application. I'm worried that the neighbor's enjoyment of the property because of the, this may well be an unreasonable intensification. I think I have to give the nod to the neighbor on this one. I don't think this is earth-shaking one way or the other, but I think that the neighbor has made his case in opposition. Is there any further discussion? Are there any motions?
I move for approval of the application.
Mr. Robinson moves for approval. Is there a second to Mr. Robinson's motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Richards seconds the motion. Is there any further discussion?
I would just like to say I'm not going to, I'm going to oppose the motion based on that. I also feel that the neighbor made the case that it will impact them negatively.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, the motion is for approval, and those in favor, Mr. John, did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that I have to agree with the neighbors. It seemed to me that if you brought it out 18 inches, it would be cutting off the light and the air. And if it was 18 inches in, they could do what they want to do, and the problem itself would be solved. I think it's just more aesthetic than anything else. So I would definitely vote against the approval.
Yeah, I think that everybody has had the say unless someone tells me otherwise. The motion is on the floor. It's been seconded for approval of the application. If you voted for approval, please say aye. And if opposed, nay. Ms. Grass.
Nay.
Mr. Judon.
Nay.
Mr. Morrison.
Nay.
Ms. Richards.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
And Mr. Krawcheck votes nay. By a vote of 4-2, the motion fails, and the applicant, the application is denied. The next item on the agenda is number 28, Sutherland Court. Is for a variance to allow a subdivision of this lot to create two lots, Lot 1A and Lot 1A2 that do not meet the required frontage of 64.2 feet on a public right-of-way. Lot 1A1 having a lot frontage of 50.71 feet, and Lot 1A2 having a lot frontage of 38.72 feet. It's on DR 1F. Mr. Batchel.
A load up here. Sutherland Court. This is a vacant residential lot in Hampton Park Terrace neighborhood, and zoning of DR1F. This is a zoning district that allows multifamily residential on lots that are large enough to meet the minimum lot size requirements. And this neighborhood, although it has a lot of single family homes, does have large lots. And with that zoning, this lot in particular is large enough that it could accommodate 3 dwelling units. The building that's shown here on this zoning map, that building was a duplex. That was demolished. It's not historic, wasn't historic. It was demolished. And so the lot is now vacant. Here's an aerial image of the property today. And surrounded by residential properties, except for this property right here, which I believe is a church. And this is a survey subdivision plat showing the proposed subdivision of the property. And this subdivision would create lots. Well, should just start off by saying that the existing lot has 89 feet of frontage on Sutherland Court. And the subdivision would create one lot, lot 1A1, with 64.2 feet of frontage. And, oh, I'm sorry, 50.71 feet of frontage. And new lot 1A2 with 38.72 feet of frontage. Now, the average frontage requirement for subdividing residential lots within existing residential neighborhoods does apply. And so when we take that into account, the minimum frontage requirement for the DR1F zoning district of 40 feet, that's increased to 64.2 feet. And that is because we have to take into account large lots that surround the property, and that throws the average off, makes it quite large, 64.2 feet. So they're requesting a zoning variance to allow this lot that could accommodate 3 dwelling units in a complex or 3 townhouse units. They're requesting a variance to create 2 single-family residential lots to accommodate single-family homes, detached homes. And these plans will show the applicant's proposed homes for these lots. You see these dashed lines on this site plan. Those are the setback lines for the properties based on the minimum setback requirements for the zoning district. So this lot has the larger frontage by virtue of its odd shape. We'll have a 2.5-story house, and by the way, the zoning of this property limits the height of buildings to 2.5 stories. But it would have a 2.5 story house shown here. These are the elevation for the proposed house, 2.5 stories, taking advantage of that additional half story that is permitted. The property is not not impacted by flood zone regulations, so that's not an issue. This is a view of the design of the house. Now, the other lot, the narrower lot, would also have a single family home on it. Again, a 2.5 story house shown here. Similar in design. So that is the request that's before you tonight. So let me get my file. The applicants would rather do these single family homes, detached homes, 2 single family homes rather than 3 units in a condominium or rental configuration, or actually 3 one-family attached dwellings would also be permitted. So in terms of the net result, what goes on this lot, I think their proposal for 2 single family detached homes, 2.5 stories, makes a lot of sense and would be more appropriate for the character of that area, which again is, despite the zoning, mostly single family homes. And so for that reason, we support this request. I believe there may be one neighbor who objects to this request, but we also have a letter of reluctant support from another neighbor, which I'm happy to reference record and at the appropriate time. And I know that the applicants are in attendance, so I will go ahead and just note them to be panelists. And let's see. Okay, so I promoted the applicants to become panelists, and they are, and I'm not sure, Ms. Ashby, do we have any statements in objection or people signed up to speak in objection to this?
No, Mr. Batchelder, we have, of course, the applicant who is signed up to speak. But I do have one person that has signed up to speak in support. The rest of my communications are emails.
And is that person that signed up to speak in support, is that an applicant?
No, this is, I guess, a member of the public is how it has been shown, that lives in the neighborhood that signed up to speak.
Well, why don't I? Oh, I'm sorry.
Have any letters in opposition?
Yes, Mr. Krawcheck, I do.
Okay. Mr. Batchelder, what is your recommendation?
So my recommendation is for approval. This is an unusual circumstance. Number one, to have a vacant lot in this neighborhood, but number two, it's a lot that is large enough that it would accommodate 3 dwelling units under the zoning. The applicants are choosing a less intensive way of developing the property, but by trying to subdivide it into 2 single-family lots for new detached homes. I think that's a more appropriate configuration for the construction of homes on this lot. And so my support is based on that. And so I'm in support of this request.
Okay, so let's go ahead and hear from the applicant.
Did you need to swear me in, Mr. Krawcheck?
I will. Is the applicant, is it Ms. Crosby?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ms. Crosby, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth will help you God?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee. I did want to make one correction. The house that is on the lot is still there. They have a demolition permit. It has not been demolished yet. I know the picture that you've got, it totally looks like it's been demolished, but it actually is still there. But like I said, they have a demo permit in hand. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, when the new owners purchased this lot, as Mr. Batchelder had mentioned, their zone DR1F. They can put 3 townhomes, but they didn't want the higher density. They knew the neighbors didn't want the higher density. Even without any variances, they could still put multifamily on there, but that is not it's just not their desire. They want to be good neighbors, and that's what the intent of this application is to achieve. So they've been talking to the neighbors surrounding up and down the street and around, and basically I want to mostly focus on the fact that we are simply just asking for the lot frontage. In doing research, I have measured all of the Sutherland Court addresses. Not a single house on Sutherland Court meets the 64.2 feet lot frontage based on Charleston County GIS. And one of the largest lots, widest ones, excluding ours, because obviously ours is the widest prior to the subdivision. I actually was able to pull an old plat, and that's 5 Sutherland Court, and that lot is only 40 feet wide. And that is, if you look between 5 and 3, and it's funny because I did the GIS, or I'm sorry, 60 feet wide. I'm sorry, please, I correct myself, 60 feet wide. And that's 5 Sutherland. 3 Sutherland is approximately 58 feet wide. 1 Sutherland is approximately 41 feet wide. And 6 Sutherland is approximately 40 feet wide. So all of the Sutherland Court facing addresses in this neighborhood, other than our current larger lot that we could put multifamily on, actually doesn't meet the street frontage. So I don't feel that we have an unreasonable request based on the fact that we're trying to reduce the density. We are at the 38 feet to the 50 feet that we're requesting, very much so in keeping within a couple of feet from the most narrow to within a couple of feet to the widest on that street.
Any questions for Ms. Crosby? Thank you very much. Mr. Batchelder, anyone else?
Well, I do have a letter that I'll just read into the record. This is a letter from Hunter Kennedy, who lives at 121 Moultrie Street, an adjacent property to this property. I do not oppose the variance request for the subdivision of the property at 28 Sutherland Court, only because I have no other choice. The current DR1F zoning allows a 2.5-story triplex to be built on the existing lot. which the developer was threatened to construct if immediate neighbors do not support his plans to build a two and a half story single family homes. The previous variance on the property, which was allowed to lapse this year, required a smaller pair of two-story structures in scale with the other existing homes on the alley. The current applicant made no effort to negotiate in good faith with the neighborhood due to the multifamily provision of the current zoning code. My neighbors and I feel strongly that new multifamily developments are inappropriate for historic Hampton Park Terrace, and that abuse of the zoning provision will continue without vigilant support from the city's zoning board and staff. Regards, Hunter Kennedy. And that's the only letter that I've received in support. Unless Ms. Ashby has anything else.
Ms. Ashby, do you have some letters in opposition?
Yes, sir. I have another letter of support, and I do have a couple of letters of non-support, and just a statement from the neighborhood association.
Yeah, read the support letter first, please.
Yes, sir. This is from Marshall Walker that states he just wanted to add support for the two single-family homes proposed on Sutherland Court. And the other letter that I have is just a statement from the neighborhood president clarifying that they are currently not meeting. So they could not send a letter of support for this project since they are not meeting and cannot voice for our neighborhood support or argument against this project. They just wanted this to be read into the record. And then I have two letters of non-support that I will try to summarize. The first one is from an Andrew Williamson who lives at 5 Sutherland Court that says that I'm not in favor of the proposed developments on these lots. However, the developer has pointed out in not so subtle ways that if he does not get our support, that he will just proceed with the triplex. Neither of these proposals are cohesive with the current makeup of existing homes on the street. These 3-story buildings will tower over the small cottages like homes on Sutherland Court. And he also states that this lot should not have been allowed to be split into the current configuration. Compounding that mistake with this request is just another mistake. That's from the owner at 5 Sutherland Court. And then these are the owners at 478 Hugie Street, Kim and Brian Ralph, who states that they have been in the neighborhood for the past 15 years and their property backs up to the property asking for a variance. We are beyond disappointed in the lack of action the city is taking in urban development and city planning to prevent what is going to happen at 28 Sutherland Court. We are essentially backed into a corner. Either we support the variances request for insufficient street frontage for the subdivision 28 Sutherland, or the current owner will build an elevated triplex on the property, which he has threatened many times to do. They go on to say that because of outdated zoning regulations, developers will continue to take advantage of homeowners, putting their profits over the neighborhood's best interests. Please update your zoning to protect our historic neighborhood. Those are the communications that I have. Thank you.
Ms. Ashby, did you say that Mr. Chandler had signed up to speak in support?
There is someone that has signed up, a Mr. Johnny Chandler.
Okay. So I missed him, but I'm going to go back and allow him to speak. Mr. Krawcheck, if you do want to swear him in.
Yeah, proceed, Mr. Mitchell.
I believe I'm on now.
Yes.
I'm ready for my oath.
Mr. Chandler, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, sir.
Proceed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the zoning board. I'm here to express my explicit support for the subdivision of this lot at 28 Sutherland Court. My reasoning is the fact that I don't see an undue burden in a smaller than average street frontage. And while the street frontage is considered to the Sutherland Court's properties, I believe that the cohesiveness that has been mentioned should actually be with the properties that it stands on the side of, so the east side of Sutherland Court, which are the Moultrie properties. For the record, I am the homeowner of 115 Moultrie Street. I am not directly abutting, but I am visually abutting. So I do see the back of this duplex, and I do have a visual, and as was mentioned in the prior, a air and light sort of stake in this, but that's not what's at hand here. I just would like to point out as well that all of my interactions with the property owners have never had a threatening tone to them. It has been mentioned by the other letters. So I would like to have that on the record. Again, I want to point out here that the only thing that's at request here is a adherence to the street frontage. There is no lot size. They are adhering to the 4,000 square foot minimum lot area for a single family in this zoning. That's under section 54, TAC 301. They are not asking for a height variance, the 2.5 stories. And they are also putting porches that are only on the single level, so they won't be peering into the abutting neighbors. Therefore, I am absolutely in full-throated support of this, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak and to give my my side of the thoughts from the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Ms. Crosby, would you like a short reply?
Yes, I had a question for Ms. Ashby. I didn't quite catch the second opposition letter. Did you say that was 478 Hugie?
Ms. Crosby, that letter that I read are the owners of 478 Hugie. Yes.
Okay, because they said that they abutted that property, but they don't. So I wanted to clarify that also. I can't speak for conversations that have taken place between the lot owners and the surrounding neighbors. So I'm a little taken back at the word threat. But again, I feel that maybe it was more of, please understand that we're trying to be in keeping with the single family residences in this neighborhood. We have the capability to do the townhouses. I mean, I think that the property owners are trying their best to work with the surrounding neighbors. Again, we're only asking for a lot frontage. Again, we are in keeping with all of the other Sutherland Court facing lots. The other thing, you know, just to sort of back up the gentleman that spoke in support, we are within a couple of feet of the building heights of 125, 123, and 121. There is not going to be any towering of those, our proposed houses over those other houses. Those houses are between 32 and 36 feet high. We've proposed 32.8 and 33.6. So like I said, we've done everything we could with this proposed subdivision to be in keeping with the neighborhoods. We're in keeping with the adjacent heights of the adjacent lots, those house heights. We are in keeping with the lot width for the Sutherland Court facing properties. I think that we've done everything that we could to make these homes fit and be aesthetically pleasing and to reduce any sort of negative impact that they might have. We're going to have less houses. We're going to have the same lot width ranges. We're going to have the same lot height or house heights with the abutting properties. I think that it would be wonderful if it's allowed by the board, if the actual lot owners would be able to also speak. I believe that they are both signed up, Bruce Kurloff and Scott Stamps. They can speak more directly about the conversations that have taken place between them and the neighbors.
Mr. Batchelder, I kind of hate to go backwards in this process. Did we miss the lot owners?
Well, they were able to speak up when we heard from the applicants and Miss Crosby spoke, but I guess they chose not to speak at that point. If they do want to speak now, it would be appropriate probably to have you swear them in. And that's Mr. Stamps and Mr. Kurloff.
Yes.
Kurloff.
Yes.
Okay, Mr.
Stamps.
Applicants, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir. We do.
We'll hear from you.
This is Bruce Kurloff, one of the owners of the property, and I can't really comment and say to myself, I don't know where they're really coming from. It seemed like some of their dissent was towards the way the place is zoned, not necessarily towards us, but I find it odd that we would be accused of threatening to do something we're allowed to do when we're going out of our way to make it more appealing. I don't know why we would ever go to someone and say, hey, we want to do this, but we're threatening what we can do. We're trying to get more aesthetically pleasing houses as opposed to townhomes in an area that is dominated by single family homes. So I can't speak to where they interpreted what we said, but I guess if we left it as if we weren't able to do the single family homes, we would have no choice but to go and build 3 towns, because we certainly have no intention of leaving the existing property as it is today. Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Bruce. Yeah, I agree. Really, we went to the owners of the surrounding properties, all the adjacent properties, and across the street proactively to say, what would you guys like? I don't think that's very normal, but again, in the spirit of being good neighbors, trying to fit the neighborhood the best, that was our intent. I can state for the record, no threats were ever made to any property owners on Southern or any adjacent properties in this process. Ms. Ashby, I do want to say there should have been one more letter of support. May have been my fault, from Tiff Mitchell at 125 Moultrie, which is to the left of this property. You're looking from Sutherland Court. So again, for the record, I want to state that. I apologize if you didn't get it. It's in your inbox now. So yeah, that's really, I guess, my main point. So we thought we were doing the best thing for the neighborhood here, and I understand not everyone agrees, but we had talked to these neighbors and had verbal support from these neighbors, and so I'm not sure what's changed, but we'll await your decision at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've given this a full and complete hearing, Mr. Batchelder. Unless you tell me otherwise, I'm going to ask for discussion and motions from the members of the board.
Move approval.
Mr. Morrison moves for approval. Is there a second to Mr. Morrison's motion?
Second.
Mr. Judon seconds the motion. Any discussion? Okay, there's been a motion for approval. Those in favor, please vote aye. In opposition, nay. Ms. Grass. Ms. Grass.
He needs to unmute.
Apologies. Aye.
Mr. Judon.
Aye.
Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
and Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
And Mr. Krawcheck votes aye. By a unanimous vote, the application is approved. Thank you all very much. The next item on the agenda has been deferred, which is 10 Nashmore, which brings us to item number 7, which is 104 Cannon Street, special exception to allow non-conforming use of triplex to be expanded with an attic expansion, bedroom, bath to Unit A at Zone Limited Business. Mr. Batchett.
Sorry, I'm busy unpromoting people, and I have to make sure I didn't unpromote somebody that I didn't mean to unpromote. So, sorry. Okay, moving on. "104 Cannon Street." So this is a existing complex, and located in Cannonboro, Elliottboro. The map shows that the property is owned limited business, as are all of the properties. Limited business allows for multifamily residential, but this lot is not large enough to accommodate the minimum lot size required for 3 units. So that makes the 3 units, 3 residential units in this house, a non-conforming use. These are plans that were submitted by the applicant, including photographs of the house. You can see this is the house in question right here. Another view straight on. And it has parking in the back with the driveway providing access. And it's located right next to Fuel, which is located in the corner of Rutledge and Cannon Street, former gas station, now a restaurant bar. And so it has a commercial use right next door that certainly impacts the livability of this property. But it's been there for many years as a triplex, and the applicant is requesting your approval to enlarge one of those triplex units. So here's another larger view of the front of the property. And I'll just point out, just because this is, I think, germane to my presentation, but the house next door is nearly identical to this house. But one thing that's different about it is that the front porches are not enclosed. So on this house, those front porches, at some point years ago, portions of those porches were enclosed to provide more living space. And, and that's the way they remain today. And there's not any change that the applicant is proposing to make to those porches.
Lee, I'm sorry. What'd you say? There's not any what? The last
changes. There's no changes that the applicant is proposing to make to those porches.
Okay, thank you.
But that fits into my position on this application. So I just want to point that out and highlight that characteristic of the house. This is a view looking at the east side of the property, and here is the Fuel property right next door, parking lot, and a outdoor space in the back. Survey, site plan, you see the driveway and the parking, 3 spaces are provided in the back. So 5 units requires 5 parking spaces. So that's another aspect of this property that does not comply with the requirements. And these are the plans showing the proposed changes. So you see Unit A occupies most of the ground floor. Unit B is the back portion, small unit at the back of that ground floor. Then moving up to the second floor, Unit A occupies again most of the second floor. And then you have Unit C at the back of the second floor with access off of the rear staircase. And right now there's an unfinished attic. And the proposed plans show changes to the interior to add a staircase right here. And that would provide access up to another bedroom and bathroom in the attic space for Unit A. So Unit A would be increased, I guess, by 350 square feet. And these show the existing cross section and proposed cross section with the new staircase providing access. And that's it. So with these types of applications, again, we're looking at subsection F of section 54.110, and whether the proposed extension of the non-conforming use is unreasonable. And in my view, the increase in the size of this dwelling unit with the addition that they're proposing, the additional space in that attic, is unreasonable because it does unreasonably intensify the use, the non-conforming use of the property. There are only 3 parking spaces, and it does so without correcting any other changes that were made to this property in the past that compromise its aesthetic integrity. And by that, I mean the enclosure of those porches. So I would be open to supporting this type of a request if there was going to be a restoration of the open porches in front of this house. But because I've supported those kinds of requests in the past, of course, over the years, there have been many additions and changes to historic buildings that were inappropriate, and people have gone back and they've made corrections, and we've given them credit for that, and help and I guess supported their request for other things. So in this case, I'm not seeing that, and so for that reason, I'm reluctant to support the request. So that's my position on this request, and I see that the architect is in attendance, so I can promote them, and so I'm promoting Mr. Tucker. If the board has any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer those. If not, Mr. Tucker should be able to speak at this point.
Mr. Tucker, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Proceed, Mr. Tucker.
All right, I want to thank Lee for his presentation. Although I will agree with his conclusion. I've been watching the last few hours. You've looked for section 54.110F.
Mr. Tucker, I hate to interrupt you. There's an echo. It's very difficult to understand what you're saying. Can you address?
I'll try to get closer to the speaker. Is that better?
Yes, that is better. Thank you.
So as you've seen, there's been several or handful of projects that have similar requests as we're asking for, 54.110 section F. So we have a non-conforming use. Just to go over the non-conforming use, there are 3 units, but the 2 units that are rear property are just a little over 500 square feet, 550 square feet each. 1-bedroom units. They're small, existing. The current owner hasn't made any changes to the property. The question about the infill porches, that was done several years ago. So we've got the 2 small units at the rear of the property, and then the existing unit A, which is the proposal to add the square footage. That is a approximately 1,800 square foot 2-bedroom apartment currently. So the proposal is just approximately 350 square feet, about 10% total square foot of the house, to a space that is currently unused. So if you could move forward to the photographs of the attic space.
Are you looking for the floor plan?
Or the photos that show the attic space?
Oh yeah, right here.
Yeah. Okay, so you can see there's, because of the width of the existing house, there's very large attic. And you obviously requesting to add on to a non-conforming use is, if the owners had come to me and said, we want to do addition off the back, I would have said, because of all of the issues relative to 5010F. But because this is an existing attic space and the proposal changes nothing of the exterior. In fact, we'd have no BAR because, as you can see, there's an existing window that provides light, and there's an existing balcony which provides egress for the bedroom. So there's 0 change to the exterior of the structure. And the only change is enclosing a portion, actually less than 50% of the attic space. And of course, because of the gable roof, there's limited headroom. So the proposed space is in this right under the ridge line at the gate. So reading through 5410, we feel that this is not an unreasonable intensification because the impact, most of the impacts that are referenced are moot, not applicable. Noise, lighting, obstruction of airflow, because this proposal is all happening within an existing structure. So we feel that we are not unreasonably intensificate. This is not an unreasonable intensification of the non-use. Thank you.
Does that conclude your presentation, Mr. Tucker?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay, thank you very much. Do any of the members of the board have any questions for Mr. Tucker?
I would, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to hear him address the point raised by Mr. Batchelder about the limited parking and additional pressure on the parking.
Yeah, this is existing 3 units, 4-bedroom, and it is a proposal for one additional bedroom, but I think you all are familiar with that area. This house is located next to that bar on the corner. So there's usually ample street parking. And I guess I would say I don't think it's an unreasonable intensification.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone, Mr. Batchelder, who wants to speak in favor of the application?
Ms. Ashby, do we have anybody that wants to speak in favor or any letters of support?
No, Mr. Batchelder, we do not have anyone that has signed up to speak or any communications of support or non-support.
Okay, is there any discussion then amongst the board members? Are there any motions?
So is the only question the parking? Is that the main reason? I guess that's back to Lee.
Well, that's a concern that they are expanding the size of Unit A and accommodating more people, and so yes, that's a concern. And I normally wouldn't be supportive of just simply expanding a unit like this in this situation. I might if there was some effort to restore those front porches, but under the circumstances with the limited parking, I'm concerned about that.
Isn't there supposed to be some comment on some effort to find parking?
Well, the parking special exception is not a request in front of us tonight. There's no change to the current parking count. And they're not increasing the number of units, so there's no shortage in that respect. It's just the fact that they're short on parking right now causes me this concern.
So this is a same question, is this an unreasonable extension or expansion of a non-conforming use? And factors to be considered are parking, traffic, light, air, the same things that we considered on Limehouse Street. Mr. Batchelder.
Correct.
Mr. Robinson, does that address your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Can I just ask, just for clarification, just one thing of Mr. Batchelder? So you said that the increase in the size of the dwelling unit is unreasonable because it unreasonably intensifies the use of the property, and you're basing that on the parking. Is that, I know that that's been asked, but I'm just trying to clarify it one more time.
That's the main issue that I see, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
any further discussion? Any motions? And Mr. Batchelder, your recommendation was not for approval, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Any members of the board have any motions?
Well, I've got a comment. You know, that there's a lot of room up in that attic, and I think it, you know, is a disservice to the property not to utilize the room available in a pre-existing building. And I know we've had these issues come up before, and it, it sounds fairly reasonable to me.
I tend to agree with Mr. Robinson. I would move for approval.
Okay. Ms. Richards moved for approval. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Robinson seconds Ms. Richards' motion for approval. Is there any further discussion? Okay, those voting in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, nay. Ms. Grass.
Aye.
Mr. Giordano.
Aye.
Mr. Morrison.
Aye.
Ms. Richards.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
And Mr. Krawcheck votes aye. By unanimous vote, the application is approved.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is 431 Meeting Street, and that item is deferred, which leads us to item number 9, which is 6 Elmwood Avenue, Hampton Park Terrace. Special exception to allow horizontal expansion, mudroom, stair, laundry room, bedroom, bath, and the vertical extension, master bedroom, bath, and closet that extends a non-conforming 13.87 foot total side setback, 15 feet required, DR1F. Mr. Batchelder.
We have another residential property in Hampton Park Terrace, located on Elmwood Avenue between Hugie Street and Congress Street. You see that the property, the lot size is typical of the surrounding properties on Elmwood, and the existing home is a one-story home on this lot. Many story homes in the neighborhood, but this happens to be a one-story home. Zone DR1F, like all of the surrounding properties. Here is a view of the house from Elmwood Street and the backyard. And what they're proposing to do is build a second floor, essentially, at the back of the property. So this view shows the front facade, and in the back is this two-story section, well back from the front. So elevation drawings are misleading in that sense, but the site plans show exactly what they're proposing to do. And here you see the demolition plan. So there's an existing shed right here that they are proposing to demolish. And this shows the proposed site plan. So within the allowed building setback for this lot, except for the total side setback requirement, but this minimum side setback requirements and the minimum rear setback are shown with this red dashed line. And you can see that the proposed addition at the back of the house fits within those dashed lines. But it does not meet the total side setback requirement for this zoning district of 15 feet. So that is the issue that is before you, is the extension of the non-conforming building footprint that is non-conforming because it doesn't meet the total side setback requirement. These are close-up views, additional bedroom, bathroom, mudroom on the ground floor, and stairs leading up to the second floor, master bedroom, closet, bathroom addition. in elevation. This is the front elevation, side elevation. This gives you an idea that it really is minimized and located all the way at the back of the existing house. So the character of the historic home is maintained. And again, these are challenging. There's always challenging ways to try and add to these homes. I always appreciate applicants who want to do it in a way that's positive to the home and to the neighbors. And so I'm supportive of this request because I think it is, number one, under the test that is in front of us, section 54.110, including the same test we've been applying to several other applications tonight. The impact is not unreasonable. There will not be any adverse impact, I don't believe, on light and air, on adjoining properties, or the aesthetic character of the environment. So I think those are the main issues that are part of this test. And so those are the drawings that were submitted by the applicant. And I know that they are in attendance, so I will promote them. But I don't believe we have any letters of objection or anybody who wants to speak in favor or in opposition to this request. Is that correct, Ms. Ashby?
Mr. Batchelder, we do have a letter of support
I'm
from a
sorry.
neighbor.
Okay.
Mr. Batchelder, that being the case, if there's no opposition and you're in favor of the application, I think that we can treat the matter as being uncontested, as we do when we have an in-person hearing. And so I would ask if there is a motion for approval.
I move to approve.
Mr. Judon moves approval. Is there a second to Mr. Judon's motion?
A second.
Okay, Ms. Grass seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Ms. Grass.
Aye.
Mr. Judon.
Aye.
Mr. Morrison.
Aye.
Ms. Richards.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
And Mr. Krawcheck votes aye. By a unanimous vote, the application is approved. The next item on the agenda is item 10, 68 Gadsden Street. It's a special exception to allow construction of a single-family residence on a lot of insufficient size. The lot area is 4,394 square feet, 6,000 square feet required. STR, Mr. Batchelder.
Let's see. So this is a residentially zoned lot in the Charleston Village Neighborhood Association. It sits on the northeast corner of Gadsden Street and Bennett Street. The residential zoning is shown here by the green shading, which is a single and two-family residential zoning district that applies to all of the properties in this area of Gadsden Street, Bennett Street. This is a view of the property in its current state. So the history of this is that this property, although it was residentially zoned, was used for many years for commercial use. There's a one-story office building. I'm going to guess that this was originally some sort of medical office when it was constructed because of its proximity to the hospitals and the presence of other similar buildings in the area that were devoted to medical office uses in the past. So it more recently was used as an interior designer's office. And then it's been vacant, I think, for a few years. And then it has this surface parking lot, which you can see along Gadsden Street. So the entire site is paved with building or asphalt for parking. Very unsightly, very inappropriate for that part of the neighborhood. And the applicant is looking to reestablish the two lots that actually still exist. They were never officially abandoned, but those lots are the original residential lots that were created with the subdivision for this area of Charleston Village, and looking to reestablish residential uses on those lots. And these are photographs submitted by the applicant showing surrounding properties, other residential uses, survey of the existing property. Actually, this is the plat that shows the two lots that still exist and are recognized by the city of Charleston and Charleston County with separate TMS numbers. But each lot is consistent in size with the other lots on the side of Bennett Street. And so all they're trying to do is put back what was originally intended, maybe was originally there, I don't know, with two single-family dwellings. But the problem is that both lots, lot 32 and lot 33, are not large enough to meet the minimum lot size for this zoning district of 6,000 square feet. And so these are both requests for a special exception to allow construction of single-family homes in these lots of insufficient size. And the ordinance states that the board is to consider this as an exception where it finds that the site plan that is proposed is not in conflict with the intent and purposes of the zoning ordinance. These are the plans. This is a site plan showing the proposed single-family homes on each lot with the parking provided. Additional plans showing what they will build. Of course, this is within the area where the design of these homes will be subject to the BAR approval. And these are additional slides that were submitted by the applicant. I know, just to point out, their property with STR zoning does allow for the development of single-family attached dwelling. And because of its size, they could potentially do 4 single-family detached dwellings in pairs, 2 and 2, as is shown on the left side, but they want to do the 2 units instead. And if I go back to the zoning map, if you split this lot in half right here, you can see how that proposed lot size will be approximately the same as the other homes on that side of Bennett Street in this block. And those, as I believe, all of those properties have single-family homes. So the idea of building 2 single-family homes on 2 lots on this corner oriented towards Bennett Street makes perfect sense to me, and I support this request. And I see that the applicants are present. And I know we have, and I have in my hands a letter that is from the Charleston Village Neighborhood Association. And it states that the Charleston Village Association supports the granting of the special exception for 68 Gadsden Street. This will allow construction of a single-family residence on each of lots 1 and 2 at this address. The neighbors living close by strongly support this exception, as do others in the neighborhood. This proposal, if approved, will result in 2 homes that will contribute to supporting the quality of the neighborhood and remove an out-of-date office building. The Charleston Village Association asks that you approve this request to protect the character of our neighborhood. Thank you for your consideration. And it's signed, Charleston Village Association Zoning Committee, David Moss, Phil Dufford, Yvonne Krittenberg, and Jim Lundy.
City recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, is there any opposition?
No, Mr. Krawcheck. I also have just an email of support from Director of Historic Preservation, Aaron Minigan.
Okay.
And sorry, Penny, did you say that there was somebody who wanted to speak in support?
Yes, Ms. Cassian Drolet with Historic Charleston Foundation.
Okay, so we have people, the applicants who would speak in support, obviously, and that person, nobody else signed up to speak in opposition. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Batchelder.
I just want to point that out for the board. If you do want me to, or do want to hear from the applicants and the other folks, just let me know.
Mr. Batchelder, I think that following our usual process, this would be considered a application that is uncontested, and I don't think it's necessary to hear from the applicant or from any of the proponents unless there's some special reason to do so. So I would entertain a motion for approval from the board.
I'll move for approval, please.
Ms. Grass moves approval. Is the second to that motion?
Second.
Mr. Giordano seconds the motion. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye, and opposed, nay. Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Mr. Giordano?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson?
Aye.
And Mr. Krawcheck votes aye. By a unanimous vote, the application is approved. And the next application on the agenda is 68 Gadsden Street, lot 33. It's a special exception to allow construction of a single-family residence of a lot of insufficient size. Lot area is 4,374 square feet. 6,000 square feet is required. Mr. Batchelder, obviously, this is a companion application.
That's correct. And my position is the same. I'm in support for the same reasons that I've already stated.
And Ms. Ashby, is there any opposition to this application?
No, Mr. Krawcheck.
Well, since we've fully heard the previous application, and I think that it's fair to say this is the city recommends approval, and this is an uncontested application. And do I hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
Mr. Robinson moves approval. Is there a second to his motion?
I'll second it.
Ms. Grass seconds the motion. Not hearing any discussion. Those in favor of the motion, please vote aye. In opposition, nay. Ms. Grass.
Aye.
Mr. Judon.
Aye.
Morrison.
Aye.
Ms. Richards.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
And Crowcheck votes aye. The motion is unanimously carried and the application is approved. The next and last application for us is item number 12, which is 46 and 48 Smith Street. It's for variance to allow construction of buildings units A through D with a 3-foot south side setback and units E and F with a 0-foot rear setback, 9 and 25 feet required, DR1F. Mr. Batchel.
Okay, so our last application concerns a property in Charleston Village. And this is over a half-acre size lot on Smith Street between Montague and Wentworth Street. Residential in nature, and the property includes a historic home right here and dependencies to the rear, and then several other buildings that are not historic that were constructed 20th century buildings, not historic, but contain residential units as well as a garage back here. So this property unfortunately comes to us after suffering a catastrophic fire in 2017. The main house caught fire, and it was July of 2017. And the fire department was able to put it out after some time, but it caused significant damage to the main house. Thankfully, there's a brick wall back here leading to the dependency units in the back, but the main house was significantly damaged, and it has not been approved for demolition by the BAR. The BAR has reviewed this property since then, and they have made it clear they're not going to support the demolition of the house. They want to see it stabilized and restored. And unfortunately, it hasn't been stabilized yet, but luckily, whatever's left of the structure has been capable of standing up in spite of the storms that we've had each year since then. And but that's not going to last forever. As you can see from this aerial view, a significant portion of the house is open to the elements and is suffering as a result. And here's another view. So you can see that just looking at the roof, the damage is extensive to the house, and it's a concern obviously for adjoining property owners, and it also impacts the sidewalk. I think the sidewalk is barricaded in front of the house, and so the property's been sitting, and we have potentially a buyer who would like to purchase the property and restore that house. And and make other changes to the property that require your approval. And the zoning on the property is such that 11 dwelling units are allowed on this property because of its size. At over a half an acre, it will allow for 11 dwelling units. Parking is still required, and you've got to provide the minimum of 1.5 parking spaces per unit. But as you can see, it's a quite large property, and these are photographs of the existing house, showing the extent of the damage on the main house. The applicant is present with the architect and actually 2 architects who can speak to this issue in much greater detail if the need arises, but I'm going to just kind of briefly summarize what they're looking to do. So this building right here, this building right here, and this building in the back, this garage, all those buildings get demolished under the plan that they have. The historic home up front, as well as the dependencies, get restored. Major work will go into restoring the main house. As you can see, it's quite heavily damaged. And other units in the back, this is the closest dependency with that brick wall that you can kind of see in this location right here that saved it from damage from a fire that raged right next door. Then there's a building at the very back of the property. Those get restored, and the net result is the plan to go back with 11 dwelling units. You can see these are old Sanborn maps that show the evolution of the property, but there have been multiple units on this property for many years. So 11 units is not usual in this property in this area. And so there is a large tree right here, a large pecan tree that they're working around with this plan. But the plan is to relocate this driveway a little bit further north from where it is right now. Right now, it's about right here. And they would move it to the north and have the driveway provide access for all the parkings. Some of the parking will be outside. Some of the parking will be underneath or inside the building footprints. And the net result will be 11 dwelling units. Close-up view, there'll be some outdoor spaces, garden spaces, re-landscaped yard. This survey shows the existing setbacks, and their existing buildings are quite close to the side property line on the south side, and then this garage structure back here is really close to the rear property line, as you can see. The proposal is to build back new buildings in place of the non-historic structures. This kind of bird's eye view shows those new buildings. And it's the buildings along the south side that require the variance to allow them to be 3 feet from that south side property line. The zoning ordinance, the zoning district rather, has minimum setbacks of 9 feet on the south side, so 3 feet is what they're asking for. And then on the back, they're proposing to locate this right up adjacent to the rear property line, which is shared by an accessory building on the neighboring property. right next door. And again, that by doing that, they're maintaining that large tree in the back and able to provide parking and circulation property. So this is a pretty significant request, and just showing here, this is the setback line. Pretty sure that, yeah, this is the setback line. So it shows the extent of the encroachment for these buildings along that south side property line. And then, of course, the rear building is entirely located within the 25-foot rear setback for this lot. And this is not a normal type of request. I mean, this obviously is a pretty intensive redevelopment of the property. However, this is an extraordinary situation with a historic home that's quite significantly damaged and in need of a substantial amount of investment and work to save it. And that's what the city is really pushing for. And and it's just not anybody that's going to come along and take on this kind of a project and do it right. And we feel like this team that is looking at this property and that they've developed these plans, that they are capable of doing that. And where we are today is we're sort of on first base, and this is the first step in a multi-step process for this plan. They need the zoning approval in order to move forward and seek the BAR's permission to build these buildings and locate them in this position and have the size and scale and mass that they're proposing. But they can't get to the BAR until they get through the zoning part of this at the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I feel like this is a project that will be scrutinized, very heavily scrutinized by the BAR. The neighbors are aware of this. I know the applicants have met with all of the adjoining neighbors, and the most impacted neighbors are the neighbors to the south and the neighbors to the neighboring property to the west, or to the east rather. We have letters of support from the neighboring properties to the south. Those are the Pratt Thomases that have the, if I go back to the zoning map, the Pratt Thomases 144 Wentworth Street or Smith Street. Let's see, that's yeah, that's Smith, Wentworth Street rather, 144 Wentworth. And then I know we have a letter from Penny. Do you have the letter from the doctor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you have that letter, and that is a letter from
James Simpson, MD at 142 Wentworth.
right.
Where is his house?
At 142 Wentworth, this is the house right here.
Next door to Pratt Thomas?
Yes. And then 140 Wentworth is owned by the owner of 138 Wentworth. And I have a letter here from Mark and Allison Lawrence as well. They say that they have resided at 50 Smith Street, which is the property to the north, right here, for the past almost 13 years. And they've been obviously very concerned about the disrepair of the subject property since the significant fire 3 years ago this summer. Since the fire, the property has remained with only a partial roof and has fragments of wood and debris hanging out of shattered windows and walls of the various states of disrepair, looming precariously over our driveway. This has resulted in debris, roofing, and pieces of glass continually falling onto our property after the storms and at times in a modest wind. It is currently, and has been for almost the last 3 years, an unsafe condition. We are very concerned about facing yet another coming hurricane season. They met with the applicants recently and shared their plans, to stabilize and it says, while we would like to have more information on the timing and construction methods to avoid as much possible interference with our property, we are aware there will be some need to encroach on our driveway and structure. We do ask that as part of any approval, we shall be provided periodically with more details and schedules of work. We are aware of their desire for 11 units, the moving of the main driveway open, as well as one car spot adjacent to our existing driveway, which I believe they've done away with that request, as I believe. We also know of their requested variance for setbacks of 3 feet and would like further details on this as well. While we remain concerned about the safety and timeliness of the construction, particularly blockage of our driveway, we strongly support their intention to resuscitate the historic property per their plans. It is long overdue. And then I have a letter also from the owner of the property at 4648 Smith, Dr. Byron Williams. He obviously supports this request. He says, since he's owned the property for over 40 years, I believe it relevant to give the planning board the historical context. And now deceased owners did approach me approximately 28 years ago for the same approval for me to build a structure on their property along the lot line. I did agree to their request, and this is, he's speaking to the property Villa de la Fontaine at 138 Wentworth, which is right here. So he's saying that 28 years ago, he was approached by them and he did support their request to allow them to build this building in very close proximity, actually right up to the property line of his property. And he did agree to their request with the gentleman's understanding that should I ever need the same consideration, they would also agree to a reciprocal request. And the Pratt Thomases have written saying that we've been approached recently by the applicants whom we did not know personally, but are aware of the terrific job they did at 1 Meeting Street to bring it back to its full grandeur. They presented us with their plans June 9th. We are aware of the variance they are seeking from a 3-foot setback from our property. Currently, it is 1 to 5 feet. In addition, we are aware that their plans have windows facing our property subject to the 15% fascia area, as well as modifications to the driveway openings. We are also aware that the unit density of 11, which we are being told is allowed per current code, We believe their plan fits well with the overall character of the neighborhood. It is harmonious with our property, and we support their plans to redevelop 4648 Smith Street. So we have letters of support, and I know, Penny, you said you have a letter from Dr. Simpson.
Yes, sir.
Could you read that into the record, maybe?
Yes, sir. Dear sirs, I'm the owner of 142 Wentworth Street, which is contiguous to the above referenced property. As you may know, 4648 Smith Street suffered a catastrophic fire now 3 years ago. We have been approached recently by Freddie and Bill Hike via the current owner, Byron Williams, and presented their plans for 4648 Smith Street. I am aware of the variance they are seeking from a 3-foot setback from our property. Currently, it is 1 to 5. In addition, we are aware of their plans to have windows facing our property, subject to the 25% of fascia area per code, as well as modifications to the driveway opening on Smith Street. I'm also aware of the unit density of 11, which we are being told is allowed per current code. We believe their design and plan fits well with the overall character of the neighborhood, is harmonious with our property, and I support their plans to redevelop 4648 Smith Street. Sincerely, James G. Simpson, MD.
And Penny, just to make sure, there's nobody that signed up to speak other than the applicants. There's nobody that signed up to speak in opposition to this request. And obviously the applicants aren't signed up to speak in opposition, but nobody signed up to speak in opposition. We don't have any other letters in opposition. Is that correct?
No, sir. We do have someone that signed up to speak in support.
Right. So if the board would like to hear from the applicant and the other person that would like to speak in support, and maybe it would be appropriate to at least hear a little bit from them because of the significance of this request. I know this, just looking at it for the first time, this looks very like a big request, an extensive request, but it's a significant situation that we have here. And so maybe it's worth hearing a little bit from the applicants, but I'll leave that up to the board members to decide.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate, Mr. Batchelder, to hear from the brief statements from the applicants in support. Are the applicants present?
I'm in the process of promoting them, and so I have promoted the applicants to be panelists. If you unmute yourself.
If this is to the applicants, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? And please state your names.
I do, Bill Huey.
Proceed, Mr. Urie.
I do on behalf of Mark Rigobuto, and I'm going to speak on behalf of Bill and Freddie Hecht.
Very good. Mr. Yu, you want to proceed?
Mr. Krawcheck, I will defer to Mark Rigobuto at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Rigobuto.
Yes, sir. So we wanted to let you know that the applicant, as you see by the effort they've put into working with all the neighbors, is fully committed to working with all of the stakeholders and has been doing so. So you see, we've talked to the neighborhood. I do believe we missed one letter from Mike and Michelle Seekings, which abut the property as well, and he did send his letter in today. We have met with the Historic Charleston Foundation and have had numerous meetings with them and are in continued conversations with them. I believe they're signed up to speak in support. We have also met with the Preservation Society of Charleston and had very productive and positive conversations with them, as well as the representatives of the Neighborhood Association, to include Ms. Fortenberry, Mr. Duffert, and a few other gentlemen. And so we're working very collaboratively with everyone that's a stakeholder to deliver what we think is going to be an exceptional product. And we understand the steps necessary, with you being the first step. I would like to point out that the HECs have a strong track record in restoring large, complicated projects as they have at 1 Meeting Street. As it relates to the Grand Historic Building, Bill Huey and Associates and Frederica Hecht have been working closely with the city and Dennis Dowd to develop a plan to rehabilitate the historic structure. They have come to a consensus on what that path will be in terms of what pieces will be stabilized, what pieces will be removed and rehabilitated on site, and then reincorporated back into the historic structure. And that meeting will be, with the BAR, is forthcoming. But there is consensus among the preservation groups, among all the stakeholders and the city on that path. The current plan for the board to understand is to take the historic structure and raise it 2 feet. That first floor provides unit number 1. Then what happens is in the large grand historic structure, it was the HEC's desire not to bifurcate it. And so that will be 1 unit on top. So you've got 1 on the ground, then you have what would be the second, third, and garret, all being 1 unit that represents 2. It is absolutely the project's intent to work directly with SHPO and the National Park Service to receive tax credits. Quite frankly, it's a critical element to the project. So you're going to have up to Park Service supervision and oversight on this element of the project. The rear dependency that Lee told you was defined by the masonry wall will remain as 1 unit, which it is today. That represents 3 units. The large historic structure that Lee just outlined used to be, or historically had been, 2. The current ownership took that bifurcation and made it 1. The current plan, and is absolutely the plan, is to restore it to its original 2-unit configuration. Then moving around, what you'll see is what will be the smallest building on the new construction side, that at the rear of the property, that represents 2. As Mr. Williams had mentioned, the gentleman that lived in the property prior had a gentleman's agreement. Regrettably, both of those gentlemen have passed away, and that property, as we understand, is being handled by an estate. But their building is hard on the wall, and the current location of the garage, which this building replaces, essentially takes its same footprint and location against that rear wall. Moving around to the south side, you have the secondary building, which will be 2 units as well. If you recall looking at the survey against Dr. Simmons and Pratt Thomas's property line, you'll see this variation of current existing housing stock that was built for shipwrights and builders during World War II on what was historically actually a tennis court, that it varies. It goes from 0 to 5 feet currently. So there's not a consistent pattern of development on that rear property line. And obviously, we've worked with the doctor and the Pratt Thomases to develop a plan that would address their property properly, give opportunity for maintenance so that the current building isn't slammed hard onto the wall, and to provide some free air there. Then moving to the front, I think it's very important to note that 46 and 48 Smith historically had been, obviously separate properties. So Ms. Hecht, Frederica Designs, will be working and is currently working with the city, has had numerous positive meetings with Dennis Dowd, that front building will be, will hold the street as that building should. That building will represent 2 units. And it will actually, even though it will hold the street as a primary building should, it will be lower by a number of feet than is the historic building. So you'll see this progression of height from the historic building down to the new building, which is going to be proposed and of course will be addressed at the Board of Architectural Review. Again, back to what's directly in your purview, we're not looking for any other relief than the setbacks. We're not looking for parking relief. We're not looking for lot coverage relief. We're only looking for the relief on the setbacks. As Lee noted, the reason that we really want to do this is out of respect for the primary historic property. We want to pull these away a little bit. Bill Huey and Frederica have met with Dennis Dowd and have come to an understanding and agreement that the existing entryway should be moved further north to provide that singular access through, which would then push the buildings to the south a little bit, provide vehicular access, but then provide this lovely courtyard. And even though Bill Huey's not a landscape architect, he's done a great job here to provide this wonderful green space that will be that bridge between, the public and the private domain here, and then giving you a pedestrian gate. So I think that's a quick overview. We handle all of the parking, we protect the tree, and as you see, all of the units, barring one, get their own private pocket park. So we have no parking issues, and obviously we can kind of go through the plans, but obviously I'm not sure to the degree you want to do that. But we can handle all the parking underneath, and with a few parking spaces that our landscape architect will design, and our environmental and civil engineers will work on to develop pervious surface and make sure that we meet. Just so you know, Earth Source Engineering is our civil engineer. We're very positive and have a really good outlook on how we handle our stormwater. And Russell Rosen is our structural engineer, and of course Bill Huey, the architect of record for the historic, and Frederica Designs on all the new. Happy again to answer any questions, but want to focus on the true minimal relief that we're looking for here, and the support of all of our adjacent neighbors, and no objection from the neighborhood association. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rigobuto. Mr. Batchelder, is there anyone else? I think Mr. Hughes deferred to Mr. Rigobuto. Is there another proponent that should be heard from?
Yes, Mr. Olay, and I'm going to allow her to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Batchelder. Cassandra Olay with Historic Charleston Foundation. I will be brief. We have reviewed the application for the variance. As has been discussed, 48 Smith has suffered extensive fire damage and has languished since this incident. The foundation has long been concerned about the precarious condition of this important structure, and we are pleased that a local development team has stepped up to take on the challenging rehabilitation and reconstruction of this property. The preservation of the historic structure is essential to protect the character of the historic district. We are in support of the construction of new residential units that will make the rehabilitation of 48 Smith Street feasible, and we are in support of the variance request.
Thank you, ma'am. I think the city has recommended approval. We've heard from the proponents. Do I hear any motions?
Move for approval.
Mr. Robinson moves approval. Is there a second to his motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, Ms. Grass seconds the motion. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, those in favor, please say aye, and opposed, nay. Ms. Grass.
Aye.
Mr. Judon.
Aye.
Mr. Morrison.
Aye.
Ms. Richards. Ms. Richards.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
And Mr. Krawcheck votes aye. The motion is unanimously carried, and the application is approved. We wish the applicants all best luck on that project. I don't think there's any further business to come before the meeting. Ms. Ashby, and with the unanimous consent of the board members, the meeting is adjourned.
And I just add a few things for the board members. Number one, thank you for your commitment of time over the summer to helping us get caught up. We are now caught up, and actually, as of the last agenda, I think we were caught up to all the meetings that we had missed, and so we're back on track. And the next agenda, just for your information, is quite short. How many applications do we have, Penny?
3.
3 plus maybe one
Deferred, a few deferred once we establish that.
It is quite short, and you deserve it. So thank you again for your commitment of time and service.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
y'all.
Good night.
Yeah. Have a good night. Be safe. Thank you.
Y'all too.